In the first episode of our Tech Trend season, we delved into the indispensable role of information technology in shaping the modern business landscape. Today, we come full circle as we take the conversation one step further and explore how enterprise architecture helps align technology with business goals. As businesses strive for efficiency, innovation, and adaptability, enterprise architecture becomes the blueprint for success. It's the strategic framework that ensures technology investments align with organizational objectives, creating a cohesive and agile structure for growth. Joining us for this enlightening discussion are two colleagues from PwC Luxembourg, Ravi Jhawar, director and seasoned enterprise architect with a wealth of experience in crafting resilient and future-proof architectures, and Vincent Gauché, managing director in emerging technology, who will make the link between EA and innovation. I'm your host, Christopher Rosa, and this is TechTalk, technology made simple over a cup of coffee. So, let's grab your favorite beverage, buckle up, and let's dive right into it.
Today we are going to deep dive into enterprise architecture. However, this isn't our first episode about the subject, right, Christopher?
Hi Carla, yes, I wasn't co-host at the time, but that's correct. I think we recorded one couple months or years ago, but tell us more about it.
If my memory serves me well, we released that episode back in April 2022, and we talked about EA, what is EA, the process behind it, some of its benefits, the tech trends impacting it, something like that.
Cool, so quite an introduction about it, I would say. It seems like you covered a lot already then.
Yeah, we did, but believe it or not, we still have more to talk about it because it's quite an interesting and complex topic.
And to do that, today we have Ravi and Vincent. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Carla.
Exactly. Welcome. So let's start with our usual question. Can you tell us a bit about yourselves and why you're here today to talk about enterprise architecture?
Look, my primary experience with enterprise architecture comes from serving as a lead architect for an organization which has been going through a lot of transformation. Transformation not only in terms of technology modernization, but also in the way of working with the adoption of agile, DevOps, and so on. And at the same time, a lot of changes in their organizational mandate. This experience has allowed me to witness, drive, and to deliver architecture in different ways, to try out different ways that makes impact. So I'm primarily here to share this experience with y'all. Now, having said this, I am a bit of an atypical architect in the sense that given my technology background, I have done solution architecture as and when necessary, as needed by my clients. I was also involved in some assignments related to IT strategy. So what I have basically done is to encash on the experience of these two domains and help solving day-to-day problems of my clients, becoming an enterprise architect by default.
Okay, on my side, so I am Vincent Gauché, so I am managing director at PwC. I've been focusing, I am more than 23 years of experience on the IT consulting world. And I have to say that since the beginning, I've been focusing on architecture topics in IT. Especially first on the solutioning, and I had the possibility to have many experiences as well on the enterprise architecture, mostly in banks, asset managers, private banking. Those are the type of industry I've been, working with. But definitely, I would like here to bring a little bit the solution architecture side and technology side in the discussion.
Will be definitely interesting. But in our last episode of this season, actually, we recorded on an episode on the evolution of the IT role, And we learned that organizations, they are investigating in digital transformation and adopting new technologies specifically, and more agile ways of building the systems. And we saw that the trend is for IT to become more of a business enabler, where technology delivers value and brings economies of scale to the organization. So the question linked to that then is, how does the mission of EA, so enterprise architecture, fit with agile approaches?
Alors, maybe thank you for the question, Chris. And maybe before answering, I would like maybe to complement it. I mean, you stated it somehow, but agility is definitely a topic that is part of the burning platform today. But innovation must be part of the talk and the reflection around enterprise architecture nowadays. Because this requires enterprise organization to change. More and more, we do see enterprise that gets structured around teams that focuses on building, manufacturing, maintaining products, IT products, I mean. And for enterprises that are a well-established enterprise architecture office or an enterprise architecture practice that are based on traditional enterprise architecture, we see them often struggling to comply with the need of autonomy that the teams focusing on those products actually need. And this implies that the role and the organization of the enterprise architecture office has to change. And maybe, Ravi, you can explain us how it has to change and remind us what are the challenges that they are facing on this field.
Yes, Vincent. Before I explain the changes, I'll first try to highlight the challenges so we understand the overall picture better. And what I do is I'm also going to first very quickly summarize the challenges of traditional architecture offices so that we can see how these changes, the new challenges that will be added with agile way of working. Look, most architecture offices traditionally are a lot more IT focused. And the artifacts that they build are the adoption of those artifacts is not very strong, right? Delivery teams often try to find ways in circumventing because they perceive architecture artifacts as more of a compliance requirement, and to have that level of independence. Same way, the architecture office is also perceived more as a control function that is, an obstacle to innovation and agility, which actually defeats the purpose. Now, to some extent, this is justified because some of the architecture offices are sitting on top of an ivory tower and, using their strategic plans as their Bible and not being very adaptive to the reality as things change along their way. The shift primarily will be because first, we will no longer have standard stage gates as we used to have in the past with the development cycles, which means the high autonomy of the development teams is only going to change the way the governance has been, architecture governance has been enforced so far. The primary or the biggest difference would be, first, we will not know the solution architecture well in advance, right? As things evolve, solution architecture will be built iteratively or incrementally, and architecture offices have to adapt to this reality. Secondly, the delivery cycles are going to be significantly shortened, where people will expect quick architecture feedback and advice from architecture offices as things move along through the product life cycle. In this environment, in this new context where the challenges are going to change, I believe there will be a lot of changes in the way the organizational structure, the setup of the architecture office is there in the first place, as well as in terms of the process of architecture development and governance, the way it is enforced. All these have to change in order to adapt to the reality of the changing ecosystem. Now, let me explain to you the changes that we will see in terms of the organization to start with. First, we will have a very small core team of enterprise architects that will be dedicated to defining their overall strategic alignment, architecture vision, defining enterprise wide guidelines and standards. Most likely they will be working directly together with CIOs and CEOs to ensure that they are aligned with the business requirements. Now, this is a difference with the existing setup where we used to have one core team of centralized enterprise architects including solution architects with a clear hierarchical structure, developing and maintaining architecture. Instead, we will have this core team that is only going to, focus on business alignment and defining the vision, which will be complemented with distributed, rather decentralized domain and solution architecture teams. These domain and solution architects are going to bridge between the enterprise architects and the delivery teams. Okay. Now, the way of working will change in the sense that architecture offices are going to sponsor some enterprise architects, solution architects, who will work together with the delivery teams in the product life cycle, where we will have kind of architecture working groups communicating best practices, design patterns, building the solution architecture in sprints incrementally, and integrating the overall business and development teams, right? So this is, I think, going to be a big change in the organization way. I slightly touched upon process as well, in the sense that we will no longer have one clear solution architecture from the beginning. Instead, we will have solution architecture development as part of agile sprints, and in each sprint we will have developed a minimum viable architecture that will keep growing. What would this mean is, on the one hand, we will have high level architecture that will remain the intentional architecture, where you would want to be, where you would want to be compliant with, and through each agile sprint we will be having minimum viable architecture that will be developed incrementally. So the goal of these architecture offices through this structure becomes in being able to manage this intentional architecture and evolutionary architecture, so that they create this balance where overall the evolution remains in line with what is intended to achieve.
So, and how does enterprise architecture support the introduction of emerging technologies and the digital transformation of an organization?
First, let's not forget that the ultimate role of the enterprise architecture is to make sure that the successive ways of transformation that an organization, an enterprise operates or executes are there to serve the strategy, the business strategy, and this is their key focus point for the enterprise architecture. This being said, we have to realize that the information system that the way we call it in the past is transitioning to an ecosystem, meaning that the boundaries of where the IT system of an organization start and when they stop are less and less clear or more and more blurry. This means that you not only have to consider that right now or in a very short future, organization will, of course, implement their own product or acquire their own software, but often work with external players, whether they are let's say startup or regtech or fintech or you name it. But at least it means that in this context, enterprise architects have definitely a role to play. It is clear that they should foster innovation so that it is possible for an organization to embrace those new technologies. They should collaborate as well with the risk, security, and regulation team of the organization in order to set the scene a little bit, to at least define the boundaries of the type of technologies they have to they can adopt and they can accept to use in the organization. Also, and this is also an important piece because we see that technology innovation is also accelerating. 1 year from now, when we are recording, let's say, this podcast, it became very popular, the use of large language model. That was not so much the case before the, let's say, the launch of ChatGPT 3.5. So it's important that enterprise architecture can be reactive as well to this kind of emergence of new technologies to support product teams to onboard this technology whenever required. And another type of or another area where welcoming emerging technologies or new technologies could be of an interest is also on the fact that enterprise architecture office is the guardian of the ecosystem and of its evolution. So the first objective here is to make sure that on the daily basis the system works. And to that perspective, it's important that the enterprise architects have a clear understanding of the heat map of this ecosystem, meaning by that they do understand where technology obsolescence is, so they know exactly what are the components that are eligible for replacement. And when I mean technology obsolescence, I mean by that the technologies that cost more in maintenance than it costs for evolution. That's basically the unstable ones. The components where you do have what you call smell code, so basically the technical debt that needs somehow to be removed in order to have, let's say, robust, reliable, performing product and systems, and also to be considered the question of talents. Because continuing betting on a technology where you don't have, let's say, newcomers on the marketplace that are very interested to use this technology certainly makes no sense in the mid to long term. So to that perspective, it's important that enterprise architecture also builds a plan to migrate to technologies that is more appealing to the more junior resources that will obviously be the future of the organization. So that's a little bit where I do see emerging technologies having a role to play and the adherence with enterprise architecture.
Can I ask a bit of an unlisted question? You mentioned...
Oh, here we go.
Yes. No, but you mentioned for 2023 Gen AI and large language models. Is there any concrete impact that we can see on an enterprise architectural level of these technologies today? Any trend, or is it just linked to the agility that you were speaking about before? Or does it has had an impact on enterprise architecture?
I believe that you had podcasts on artificial intelligence.
Correct.
What we do witness...
And on large language models,
yes,
specifically.
Yes, certainly, yes. But what we do absolutely see, it's a complete acceleration because we come from something that was a little bit science fiction and futuristic to something that is concrete and where you can definitely consider to leverage as a technology brick as we speak. So, of course, I have an example of a client who is who was supposed to start working on a product that was generating documents. I mean, going into that route without considering the use of large language model would have been at least an error, I would say. Now, it doesn't mean that it will fit for purpose as it is currently existing, but at least it needs to be tested and probe a little bit before you can actually say yes, this is for me as we speak, or not yet. And also to understand what are the challenges related to this technology, like I mentioned, on the risk and regulatory aspect.
Mm-hmm. So no big direct impact on enterprise architecture for that matter.
Alors, to that matter, they must revise their plan because obviously they move from a more rule-based approach to a more, let's say, to other technologies and other solutions.
Mm-hmm.
No, and maybe Ravi, you have more view on that. How can those models be used for the discipline of enterprise architecture?
Yes. So look, we are moving for enterprise architecture away from traditional models-based approach where we basically had UML diagrams representing enterprise architecture towards the use of data in being able to provide the visibility and to be able to provide the links. And in this context, I think the more we move towards data-driven architecture, the better we can leverage these models in order to be able to proactively identify and enrich those the architecture practice. I will touch upon this again in a bit.
No, but I think it's definitely interesting to see where we will land with these new technologies, also on an enterprise architecture level. But speaking about that, what are the other benefits of developing an enterprise architecture? And can you maybe give a couple examples of how we can achieve them?
Okay, I'll take this one once more. It's a good question, Christopher. And this is one question that will strongly build on the previous podcast on enterprise architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Vincent has already highlighted how enterprise architecture benefits better technology risk management through technology obsolescence and debt, addressing the technology debt. So besides those, I'll touch upon 3 other benefits with some examples. So the first one, let's understand one thing first. Enterprise architecture creates the links between strategy, business capabilities, and processes with the information and technology components that are necessary. It's all about creating those links, which means it provides better visibility and impact analysis. So impact analysis when we make changes, right? 3 years ago when COVID came in, we saw that most of the organizations had to adapt to this new reality and they had to become more digital, enable digital workplaces. Everything moved from meetings to Teams and Google Meet and Zoom calls and so on. So there was this big change. Thereafter, if you notice, one of the biggest challenges for CIOs became cybersecurity. And now we see a lot of changes that need to be addressed with ESG compliance and with DORA, for instance, as a regulation. Now, this means we are constantly changing, either because of external factors, because of regulations, or because we want to have inherent innovation and resilience. We are changing. How can one identify rather rapidly potential impact of a given change? This is where enterprise architecture comes in, right? So taking the example of resilience, if there is going to be a potential failure, which applications and business processes will be impacted? Making all the links that enterprise architecture provides, one would rather be able to quickly identify the impact of that particular failure. Similarly, introducing or if we want to optimize a given business process, and if we want to know which technologies are going to be need to be upgraded, we will be able to rather quickly be able to do so. ESG reporting, which information sets are necessary in order to perform a report? How will we be able to identify this? Enterprise architecture would help in there. So for me, this is the first one, visibility and the potential to perform a rapid impact analysis to address changes. This is the first benefit. The second one is creating a more integrated ecosystem. And this plays very well with digital transformation and innovation, because we are rapidly moving to cloud. Nearly all our clients are going to cloud. Every organization is becoming more data-centric in leveraging data for their analytics capabilities, and so on and so forth. Now, the true return on investment comes when we don't use these technologies individually in isolation, but then when we create this integrated ecosystem where they both, these technologies interact well with each other in order to provide a lot more benefits than originally perceived. So this is yet another benefit because enterprise architecture helps in creating this integration. The last one is cost optimization, because it helps in creating a standard language and standardization. It helps also indirectly in creating costs optimization. Now imagine every department is reinventing the wheel and doing things differently. We will end up creating a lot of redundancies. While if there is standardization, we can reuse a lot of things that exist within the organization, which means reducing costs. Similarly, another example of cost reduction would be applications portfolio rationalization, right? We see a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening now because of the economic climate that we are today in. This would mean that once the merger happens, for example, we will be able to see which will be the leaner set of applications that are necessary to serve the business capabilities and reduce those redundancies, resulting in costs optimization. Okay, so yeah, I think these three main benefits on creating integration, providing visibility and impact analysis to adapt to changes, and costs optimization would be three benefits I would give as examples that enterprise architecture brings in.
Yeah, there are maybe some two additional benefits you can think of with enterprise architecture. You can also consider that enterprise architecture is an opportunity to help organizations to become more data-centric, in the sense that thanks to the principle that an enterprise architecture office can define, it can force, between brackets, let's say the product team to actually put in place the necessary IT components that enables to produce, that enables to distribute data across the entire organization, including business users, I would say. So it enables as well self-service usage. But also it can, this is a chef d'orchestre of, let's say, I would say the distribution of the data. And we are, let's say, more and more going from a paradigm where we replicate data in every system that needs it to a more event-driven or a real-time or pseudo-real-time approach. And enterprise architecture has a key role to play in this field. The second benefit that you can expect from an enterprise architecture, we said it, is to foster innovation, but to foster innovation in a smart way. It's not open bar. It's basically to identify, let's say, the technology that an organization can adopt, like it was said earlier in this podcast, but also to put in place the best practices that needs to be considered when implementing this or that technology. Best practices in terms of implementation, in terms of governance, in terms of security. Those are elements where I do believe that enterprise architecture has a key role to play.
Thanks both. I think we are sold on the benefits of EA. And Ravi, you mentioned DORA, which is leads me here to an opportunity to mention that we will have episodes specifically on DORA, so stay tuned. So yes, like I said, we are sold on the benefits, but how can we measure the success of enterprise architecture concretely?
That's a very good and a very challenging question.
I like challenging questions.
Especially for a podcast.
Of course.
Yes.
No pressure.
Well, let me attempt. We will have to realize that there is no single bullet, right? Every architecture office has different objectives and they work in different contexts. So their goals are different. While some architecture offices might want to improve their senior management's involvement in their architecture practices, others might want to improve business linkage or with operating and product life cycle teams. Some may want to improve upon communication plans, and others may want to align better the governance and enforcement policies, right? So depending on the goals, depending on the context in which architecture offices work in, I always suggest to define a few dimensions vis-a-vis organizations want to improve their maturity. And once this is clear, this maturity model is clear, we can then define the metrics that are necessary to measure the success of architecture, right? I'll give a few examples. We touched upon business linkages, right? So the adoption of architecture offices. Now, if the goal is to increase the participation by stakeholders or to solve business problems in a collaborative manner, by creating a stronger integrated stakeholder ecosystem, I would say in this particular context, what the architecture office would need is to capture stakeholder feedback indicating the value. And the KPI essentially would be the evidence of business units' involvement in architecture processes and endorsements, right? So this is one example. The other example, as the theme of this podcast on innovation and agility, let's say the goal of the architecture office is to provide advice to business on how to respond to changes, because we touched upon those topics. Now, what architecture office would need in this particular context is to have clear benchmarks, thought leadership, and solution metrics, whether they come from user feedback or other metrics such as lowered costs and so on. So if that is the goal, that is what we want to achieve, then the KPIs would essentially be the articulation of how architecture has enabled the organization to reach the maturity through innovation. Similarly, the number of innovations made, how successful those innovations are, and so on. So in terms of the approach, which I can summarize, as I said in the podcast, but not provide all the metrics on measuring the success, is to identify the dimensions vis-a-vis which they want to improve the maturity, and take those goals into account, define a few set of metrics aligning those dimensions, and to be able to identify how they can identify the maturity against this. So I gave examples of benchmarks, I gave examples of capturing user feedback and so on, each of them serving a greater purpose to improve the maturity.
So I mean, now that we know how to get and how to measure it, how to measure the success and the benefits, maybe how do we get there? Maybe you can share, each of you, a couple of recommendations that you have on how to ensure the success of enterprise architecture practice.
You start, Ravi?
All right, yes, I'll go for it first. The first one is what I have already mentioned very briefly when we were discussing about models and generative AI, is I strongly believe that we are not leveraging data enough to enrich our enterprise architecture practice. And that could be a game changer. We have seen this, we have implemented and seen this across different organizations with our clients. The less of, I'm not saying completely go, throw aside all the traditional models that people are building. Yes, we still need them, but to be able to manage the overall architecture as a whole, enterprise-wide, better use of data is very interesting. Okay, so to build technology clocks, to build roadmaps on different versions that will be coming in the future, to perform application portfolio management and so on and so forth. So this use of data is very essential. The second mistake I feel that many organizations, that many architecture offices do, is an overemphasis on frameworks. So they spend a lot of time, for example, in implementing TOGAF, following it as a Bible, I think we should do less of that. We should move to a model where we can customize and simply right size a given architecture framework, which one whenever it is that the clients choose. And the goal should be to achieve speed, to have better time to market, and to create consumable artifacts. In this way, we will move towards a model where architecture office is going to provide services to their stakeholders. They can, start by internal transformation. Okay, internal customer needs, address those first. Once you have a few success stories, 1 or 2 success stories, start scaling them. But don't adhere strictly to implementing an architecture framework, because the results will be a bit too far away. It will take a very long time to achieve results. Instead, just be very quick, address these problems, and eventually improve the maturity and adoption. That would be the approach. The last advice I would give is with respect to communication. One of the first things I suggest anybody is to build a clean communication plan. Involve the stakeholders right from the beginning. Have a clear and consistent communication with all the stakeholders. Work together with business leaders as well as product managers in order to define a clear way of how we will collaborate and how it is a win-win for all the parties involved. And encourage more participation and feedback, because the more feedback we receive, the more we can improve and set up this overall continuous improvement cycle. So, and would you like to compliment me, Vincent?
On this topic, I think the function of enterprise architecture doesn't have to be conceived as a control function, but more, let's say, definitely a more pragmatic and a more on-field, I would say, function.
Right.
So toward IT folks, I would say that they should try to be perceived as part of the problem solvers. So what I think works pretty well is just by giving a chance within the forum to any team member to contribute to what the enterprise architecture could be, what could be some principle, how they could evolve. Let's say just a freedom to share some concern when having to adhere to those principles. Sometimes it's good as well to, let's say, improve continuously. And also on the, we were talking about emerging technology. So on the solutions themselves, to have a chance to discuss what are the what we see on the market popping up, what could be interesting to test in what circumstances or what context, and to let's say define the framework around that to enable experimentation. And I think it's important that enterprise architects are part of the experimentation piece, just to make sure they do understand the value of the technology. They do understand as well, let's say, the drawbacks of it and how it must be complemented so that it is, let's say, usable and workable within a specific organization. Another advice I would say for the organizations that are not yet equipped with this kind of function, I think it's good to think about it. Because we see, like we said in the beginning, that the context where traditional information system largely evolved to ecosystem, that is by definition more fragmented, more distributed, and in constant evolution, and therefore, let's say, harder or more complex to manage. It is a good function that is relevant to put in place, let's say, sensors on how the overall ecosystem operates, how it works, and to be able to perform exhaustive change impact assessment.
Well, thank you both. I don't have any other questions. Do you have any other questions, Christopher?
No other unlisted question. I think it's okay for today.
Yes, thank you so much for your advice and for your insights. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
It was a pleasure to collaborate with you, and let's maybe see for another episode.
Indeed.
Yes.
Pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all for today. This is TechTalk, technology made simple over a cup of coffee. Don't miss out on any future episodes by hitting subscribe. Thank you for listening to this episode and see you in the next one.